What the Vatican never wanted you to know about the Knights Templar. In the frozen silence between centuries, a truth long buried under fear, propaganda, and deliberate erasure begins to pulse again like a heartbeat beneath stone. Imagine the Vatican's most secret vault's chambers where even the dust seems to whisper warnings, holding documents sealed, not for decades, but for entire eras. Locked away because a single revelation could rearrange everything you ever believed about power, faith, and the men who shaped the medieval world. Now picture those forgotten manuscripts finally breathing, finally emerging from the darkness, revealing that the Knights Templar were not merely warriors of God but guardians of a knowledge so destabilizing that popes, kings, and entire kingdoms conspired to suffocate it. This is not history as it was taught in school. This is history as it was feared, mutilated, hidden, and strategically silenced. And the question burning inside you becomes inevitable. Why would anyone fight so desperately to prevent this truth from coming to light? As you step deeper into this narrative, the walls of time begin to close in around you, carrying the scent of old parchment, iron, and secrets never spoken in public. The Templars emerged not as simple crusaders, but as an elite order whose rise threatened the balance of global power in ways the Church could no longer control. Their influence expanded beyond battlefield mastery, reaching finances, politics, architecture, navigation, and even forbidden knowledge that touched the very structure of spiritual authority. In this Hulk, every image formed in your mind becomes a portal to confrontation, forcing you to face a version of the Middle Ages where nothing was accidental and everything was calculated. Every corridor of medieval history hides shadows, but none as persistent as the shadow of the Knights Templar, a shadow the Vatican tried to erase. Page by page, century after century, now imagine the moment when one fragment of truth escapes a single piece of evidence that should never have survived the fires. The inquisitions, the purges, decreed to eliminate every possible trace. That fragment triggers a chain reaction, a silent unraveling of the Church's carefully curated narrative. Through it, we witness a hidden war fought with pen and decree rather than sword and shield, a war to control the perception of holiness, justice, and divine favor. And it is here that your pulse quickens, because the more you see, the more impossible it becomes to believe this was simply historical coincidence. The Vatican's fear was never of the Templars' swords, but of their revelations, what they uncovered in the Holy Land, what they recorded in coded manuscripts, what they whispered only among the brothers of the order. These were sparks capable of igniting entire dogmas, and as this Hulk reaches its final breath, you stand before a silent choice: return to the comfortable surface of official versions, or walk down a narrow corridor toward answers that were never meant for the public. The ground beneath you feels ancient, and every step echoes as if watched by eyes long gone, yet still vigilant. You begin to realize that this is not merely a story, it is the resurrection of a truth considered far too dangerous for the medieval world to tolerate. And now, as the forbidden echoes of the Knights Templar press against the edges of your understanding, one realization imposes itself with absolute force. If the Vatican fought so brutally to bury these revelations, then what you are about to uncover carries a weight capable of changing the way you interpret faith, power, and human history itself. This is where the silence breaks and the forbidden truth begins. In the silent corridors of forgotten archives, where dust clings to manuscripts the world was never meant to see, the story of the Knights Templar begins to breathe again, with an unsettling clarity. As you step into this narrative, every detail feels heavier than it should, as if the very air carries echoes of secrets that have survived fire, erasure, and centuries of calculated silence. The Vatican spent generations shaping the official version of events, selecting what deserved to be remembered and what needed to be buried forever. Yet some truths refused to die, and the men who guarded them were disciplined enough to leave traces that no purge could fully extinguish. Walking deeper, you sense the walls around you, almost leaning in, pressing you toward a revelation that was never meant for public eyes. A revelation that begins to challenge everything you thought you knew about faith, power, and medieval history. As your footsteps resonate through this ancient vault of shadows, a new image of the Templars begins to emerge, one far removed from the sanitized legends taught in classrooms. They were not just warriors. They were architects of influence, custodians of knowledge, and key pieces in a political chessboard the Church could never fully control. Their rise was meteoric, their discipline unparalleled, and their network so expansive that even kings hesitated before crossing them. The Vatican understood early on that the greatest threat the Templars posed was not military, it was ideological. Something they found, something they recorded, something they whispered only among their inner circle, carried the potential to destabilize doctrines and unravel the foundations of established authority. And it was this invisible power, not their swords, that Rome sought desperately to erase. Moving forward, you begin to perceive how deliberate each act of suppression truly was. The destruction of the order was not a moral crusade, but a political necessity, a coordinated strategy to control narratives, silence witnesses, and eliminate documents that could never be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. Entire vaults were sealed, papal decrees rewritten, and inquisitorial records conveniently lost in fires that seemed to ignite at the perfect moment. Yet paradoxically, the brutality of the purge ended up drawing even more attention to what the Vatican feared most: the existence of a truth so dangerous it had to be erased at any cost. In every surviving fragment, every coded reference, every silent gap in official accounts begins to form a mosaic of something far greater than a simple medieval order, something that resisted being buried. By the time you reach the final steps of this introduction, a realization settles in your mind with the weight of stone. The conflict between the Templars and the Vatican was never about obedience, heresy, or gold. It was about control over a revelation capable of reshaping spiritual authority itself. And where the secret the Vatican never wanted you to know finally pushes through the cracks of time. In the first layer of the truth, the Vatican hoped would remain buried forever. The Knights Templar emerged not as mere crusading warriors, but as an elite brotherhood that mastered something far more threatening than military might: information. As they moved across territories forbidden to all other Western forces, they gained access to ruins, scrolls, and ancient structures sealed for centuries. Every expedition, every excavation beneath the Temple Mount, every coded manuscript they transported through secret routes expanded a body of knowledge that no pope or king could fully supervise. And soon it became clear that what the Templars were collecting did not simply challenge political authority, it threatened to destabilize the very foundation of the Church's spiritual monopoly. Their discoveries hinted at traditions older than Rome, teachings that contradicted established doctrines, and accounts that showed a world in which the Vatican's interpretation was not the only lens through which divine truth could be understood. This alone would have been dangerous. But the Templars committed an unforgivable act. They preserved everything in private archives, outside ecclesiastical hands. As their influence grew, so did the fear within the Vatican. Whispered reports circulated in Rome claiming that the Templars possessed manuscripts describing a lineage of spiritual authority, predating and bypassing the Church entirely. If these writings ever reached the public, centuries of theological control would be shaken to the core. The Templars' network spanning fortresses, ports, and hidden safehouses across Europe and the Middle East allowed them to transport these documents with absolute secrecy. They didn't need permission, they didn't need oversight, and most crucially, they didn't need Rome. Internal papal correspondences from the era reveal a rising paranoia. Bishops spoke of a knowledge beyond obedience, and cardinals feared that the order had grown intellectually independent, to the point of becoming untouchable. For a church built on the belief that truth must flow through its hands alone, the Templars' discovery of alternative sources of authority was nothing short of catastrophic. But what amplified the Vatican's anxiety was not just the content of these discoveries, it was the Templars' discipline in safeguarding them. They created mobile libraries, documents hidden in metal cylinders, coded communications carved into wooden tablets, and encrypted chronicles that could only be interpreted by members of the inner circle. Their archives moved faster than papal envoys, and their couriers understood routes that even kings could not track. Attempting to seize these materials was impossible. Destroying the order outright seemed even more dangerous, because knowledge scattered across continents cannot be burned in a single pyre. Rome realized it was facing not a rebellion, but a silent revolution, and revolutions founded on information are harder to suppress than any military uprising. By the time the Church understood the magnitude of what the Templars had uncovered, the damage was already irreversible. The order's discoveries had been copied, hidden, and shared in ways that ensured their survival even in the face of extermination. This was the moment the Templars ceased to be useful instruments of Rome and became its greatest existential threat. The Vatican no longer feared their swords, it feared the ideas forged in their secrecy. It feared a truth powerful enough to fracture doctrines, challenge dogmas, and ignite a spark that could outlive every decree of suppression. And it feared, above all, the terrifying possibility that the Templars' version of history was not only different, but more accurate than the one Rome had spent centuries defending. In the second layer of this forbidden narrative, the Vatican's concern turns to something even more alarming than the Templars: discovery of ancient manuscripts. The rise of an autonomous financial empire capable of eclipsing the Church's economic power. While most medieval institutions depended entirely on royal or ecclesiastical funding, the Knights Templar constructed a financial structure so advanced, tão preciso e tão disciplinado, that it became the backbone of Europe's economy, long before banks existed. Their system of deposits, coded receipts, long-distance credit transfers, secure treasuries, and loan networks made kings, nobles, and even popes depend on them for survival. In a world where gold determined authority, the Templars held the keys to nearly every vault. They managed pilgrim wealth, financed crusades, and controlled trade routes with a level of efficiency that humiliated the fiscal systems of both church and monarchy. Rome soon realized that the order had achieved the one thing no religious institution should ever have: financial independence so absolute that no decree could restrain them. As their wealth expanded, it ceased to be merely material, it became political. The Templars began to serve not as servants of the church, but as advisors to kings, mediators of conflicts, and executors of agreements that bypassed papal interference. Their network was incorruptible, and that purity of structure created an influence greater than any throne. A force operating beyond spiritual hierarchy, beyond political borders, and beyond obedience. For the church, which relied on economic leverage to maintain authority, the existence of a parallel power that couldn't be bought, manipulated, or indebted was intolerable. But what truly ignited Rome's fear was how the Templars used their wealth. Their ships moved without papal oversight. Their ports operated without royal taxation. Their treasuries answered only to the Grand Master. For the Church, wealth was a tool of manipulation. For the Templars, wealth was a tool of independence. And independence, in the medieval world, was the greatest heresy of all. By the time the Vatican fully grasped the scale of the Templars' economic dominion, it was already too late. The order's financial system had become the skeleton of Europe's infrastructure, and removing it would cause political collapse. Yet allowing it to continue meant accepting a rival so powerful that the Church's own authority began to look symbolic. The Templars had unintentionally exposed a terrifying truth. Spiritual power meant little when confronted with a structure capable of sustaining armies, influencing nations, and shaping history without ever lifting a sword. From that moment forward, the Vatican no longer viewed the order as protectors of Christendom, but as a financial colossus capable of overshadowing Rome itself, a threat that could not coexist with the Church's vision of absolute dominion. In the third hidden layer of this forbidden history, the Vatican sphere shifts from Templar knowledge and wealth to something far more unsettling: the Order's unmatched mastery of discipline, loyalty, and psychological strategy. While other medieval armies relied on fear, chaos, or brute force, the Knights Templar operated like a single organism, silent, calculado, and impenetrable. Their training did not mold soldiers, it forged identities. Recruits were shaped to abandon personal ambition, dynastic interests, and all ties that could corrupt judgment. What emerged was a warrior whose allegiance was absolute, whose courage bordered on the supernatural, and whose obedience could not be manipulated by kings or clergy. The Church realized that an army governed by a code stronger than papal command was an army outside its control. And worse, this discipline granted the Templars a psychological dominance no one else could replicate. In battlefields across the East and West, enemies reported the same chilling detail: that the Templars did not shout, did not hesitate, did not break formation, moving instead with a calm that felt inhuman. This aura of invincibility created a power the Vatican could never claim. Loyalty rooted not in fear of punishment, but in reverence for the order itself. As the decades passed, the Templars' silent discipline evolved into a deeper threat: unity. Unlike monarchies fractured by greed, unlike clergy divided by politics, the Templars were bound by a structure impossible to infiltrate or corrupt. They answered only to their Grand Master, and even he was constrained by the rule, a code of conduct more respected than any papal decree. This internal cohesion created an institution immune to manipulation, immune to bribery, and immune to the fractures that weakened every other power in Europe. Worse still for Rome, this unity inspired admiration among the people. Pilgrims, merchants, soldiers, and even nobles began to see the Templars not merely as protectors, but as symbols of purity in a world drowning in corruption. The Vatican understood the danger immediately. An institution whose moral authority surpassed its own was intolerable. History shows that the greatest threat to a centralized religious power is not heresy, it is competition for the hearts of the faithful. What alarmed Rome even more was how the Templars used this discipline beyond the battlefield. Their secrecy protocols, coded communication, initiation rites, and internal councils formed a structure reminiscent of modern intelligence agencies. They gathered information across continents, monitored political shifts, and anticipated threats before they materialized. Their silence was not just spiritual, it was strategic. A pope might know the movements of his bishops, but he could never fully track the order's operations. A king might spy on his own court, but he could never penetrate the Templar hierarchy. The Church, que sempre prosperou através do controle de informação, found itself blind, and in a society where knowledge was power, blindness was fatal. By the time the Vatican recognized the full magnitude of the Templars' discipline, it saw a truth that could not be ignored. The order had become a parallel structure of authority, one governed by loyalty rather than fear, by honor rather than politics, and by precision rather than propaganda. They were not a branch of the Church, they were a rival model of power. Their psychological dominance, their unity, and their incorruptible identity formed an institution stronger than any throne or papacy. And for Rome, a power that cannot be corrupted, infiltrated, or intimidated is not just a threat, it is the definition of danger. In the fourth hidden layer of this forbidden history, the Vatican's desperation intensifies as the Knights Templar begin to establish something far more powerful than wealth, knowledge, or discipline: alliances. Not superficial alliances formed by treaties, but deep, strategic, almost clandestine networks that connected them to nobles, merchants, scholars, and military leaders across continents. These were not relationships based on fear or obligation. They were built on respect, trust, and the Templars' reputation for unwavering honor. Kings depended on their counsel, merchants depended on their protection, and entire cities depended on their infrastructure. This meant that wherever the order planted its banner, it created communities that saw the Templars as guardians of justice rather than servants of Rome. For the Vatican, which relied on centralized authority and absolute obedience, these independent spheres of influence were nothing short of a nightmare. The Church understood too late that it had helped construct a force capable of operating beyond its reach, a force beloved by the people, admired by rulers, and respected even by enemies. And admiration, in the medieval world, could turn into allegiance faster than any decree could stop. As these alliances deepened, a new and more alarming pattern emerged. The Templars were becoming mediators of power. They negotiated disputes between kingdoms, settled conflicts that clergy couldn't resolve, and guaranteed agreements that monarchs wouldn't trust each other to uphold. In many regions, a Templar seal carried more credibility than a royal signature or a papal bull. Their word became a currency, their presence a stabilizing force in times of chaos. And this created a political paradox that shook the Vatican to its core. The Church was supposed to be the ultimate authority, yet the Templars were becoming the ultimate arbiters. Kings who once bowed to Rome began to rely more on the judgments of the order, knowing the Templars were not driven by greed or ambition, but by a complex internal code that transcended politics. The Vatican quickly recognized that such authority, once solidified, could shift the balance of power away from the papacy entirely. The greatest threat, however, lay in the order's ability to turn enemies into allies. During the Crusades, they negotiated with Muslim leaders, respected truces, protected civilians, and established systems of diplomacy that were unheard of for the time. Their ability to speak with both sides and be respected by both created a transcontinental influence the Church could never replicate. While Rome preached domination, the Templars practiced negotiation. While the Vatican drew lines between holy and infidel, the order built bridges that allowed communication, trade, and coexistence. These connections generated a flow of information and cultural exchange that greatly expanded the Templars' worldview and dangerously widened the gap between them and the Church's rigid doctrines. Rome feared that a population exposed to Templar diplomacy might begin to question ecclesiastical authority. Seeing a world where cooperation mattered more than dogma, by the time the Vatican understood the scale of these alliances, the Templars had already created a political reality no papal decree could dismantle. They were not simply warriors or bankers or architects, they were influencers of nations, shaping decisions from the shadows with a subtlety Rome could neither track nor control. Their alliances formed a lattice of stability, loyalty, and mutual benefit that transcended borders and ideologies. And this was the Church's deepest fear, an institution whose power came not from threats, but from respect, not from divine claims, but from earned trust. In a medieval world built on submission to religious authority, the Templars offered an alternative, one that made people question whether Rome's dominance was necessary at all. This realization marked the turning point when the Vatican no longer saw the order as an asset to Christendom, but as the greatest rival it had ever created. In the fifth and most dangerous layer of this hidden history, the Vatican's fear reaches its peak as the Knights Templar begin to shape something that no institution, not throne, not kingdom, not church, could ever reclaim, once created: a mythology. Unlike ordinary legends crafted by storytellers, the Templar mythology was forged through silence, sacrifice, discipline, and a mysterious aura that surrounded everything they touched. They became symbols of incorruptibility in a world rotting with political manipulation. Their white mantles marked not just soldiers, but living contradictions to the hypocrisy that infected the highest levels of both church and monarchy. Stories of their bravery spread faster than any papal decree, told by pilgrims, merchants, and soldiers who witnessed firsthand the order's unwavering courage. And every whispered tale, every rumor, every exaggeration fed a growing perception that the Templars were chosen, guided, or protected by something greater than Rome. For the Vatican, a narrative it did not author was a threat, but a narrative it could not erase was a catastrophe. As the order's mystique grew, the Church lost its grip on the one resource more powerful than wealth or armies: the imagination of the people. The Templars became not just warriors, but icons. Not just protectors, but symbols of purity in an era drenched in corruption. Pilgrims spoke of Templar knights who faced impossible odds without blinking. Merchants recounted stories of Templar escorts who never stole, never betrayed, never succumbed to greed, creating a contrast devastating to the Church's reputation. Rome, built on the belief that spiritual authority flowed only through its hierarchy, now saw thousands of believers turning their admiration toward a competing ideal of holiness. This shift was invisible, yet lethal. People were not questioning doctrine, they were questioning the Church's moral superiority. And the moment the Templars became morally superior in the eyes of the people, the Vatican knew it had lost something irrecoverable. But the Templars' mythology didn't remain confined to admiration. It evolved into a fearsome form of symbolic power. Secretive rituals, hidden chambers, coded prayers, and unexplained victories began to create a supernatural aura around the order. Enemies hesitated before charging them. Allies felt safer in their presence. Even kings whispered about the Templar secret that protected them in battle. This mystique, part truth and part imagination, created a psychological dominance that no pope could rival. Rome tried to counter it with accusations, charges of heresy, and propaganda campaigns, but the more it attacked, the more the legends grew. A myth under siege becomes even stronger, because people begin to wonder what truth is being suppressed, and the Vatican's desperation to destroy the order only deepened suspicion, turning ordinary knights into martyrs and their silence into a weapon sharper than any blade. By the time the Vatican realized the unstoppable force the Templar mythology had become, it was already too late. The order had crafted a legacy that no fire could destroy, no trial could erase, and no papal bull could silence. Their symbols endured, their stories multiplied, their mysteries survived in whispers, manuscripts, and the collective memory of a world that saw them as everything the Church claimed to be but was not. And that was the final threat Rome could never tolerate: a rival version of sanctity, born outside its walls, stronger than its decrees, and capable of outliving its authority. In the end, it wasn't the Templars' wealth, power, or secrets that terrified the Vatican. It was the terrifying possibility that history would remember the order as the true guardians of faith, while the Church stood as the institution that betrayed it. As this journey through forbidden history nears its final threshold, a realization begins to take shape, one that feels almost heavier than the revelations themselves. The struggle between the Vatican and the Knights Templar was never just about power, heresy, or territory. It was about who would define the legacy of faith for centuries to come. When Rome attempted to erase the order, it expected silence. When it ignited the pyres, it expected fear. When it sealed archives and rewrote chronicles, it expected oblivion. But instead, the fire that consumed the Templars forged something the Church never anticipated. Permanence. What was meant to be an extermination became the foundation of a legend impossible to bury. Their end, orchestrated with precision and cruelty, did not extinguish their presence, it immortalized it. And in that paradox lies the unsettling truth. The Vatican tried to control the narrative, but the narrative outgrew the Vatican. As the centuries unfolded, the world did not remember the Templars as criminals, heretics, or traitors, as Rome had insisted. Instead, the memory of the order grew stronger, transforming into a symbol of discipline, loyalty, and forbidden wisdom. The stories whispered by survivors, the rumors preserved by chroniclers, and the relics escondidos em rotas secretas reforçaram a ideia de que the Templars carried something too important to be allowed into the wrong hands. Their silence became a language of its own, speaking across epochs to anyone attentive enough to hear it. And that silence, strategic, impenetrable, deliberate, became the very weapon that outlived their executioners. The Church's version of events faded. The Templars' mystery did not. History has a peculiar habit of favoring what refuses to die. As you step back from the shadows of this narrative, the pieces begin to connect with a clarity that feels almost conspiratorial. No institution destroyed by force should continue influencing art, literature, architecture, politics, and spirituality for more than 700 years. Yet the Knights Templar do. They appear in symbols carved into forgotten stone, in manuscripts mislabeled as irrelevant, in legends carried across countries by oral tradition, in the foundations of modern banking, in the codes of secrecy adopted by later societies. Their presence became a tapestry woven into the very structure of Western civilization. Even the Vatican, in its own guarded way, preserves traces of the order it tried so violently to eliminate. That alone reveals a truth the Church never intended to confess. The Templars were never an enemy to be erased, but a force too monumental to be contained. This is the essence of their immortal legacy, a legacy born not from victory, but from resilience. They survived, not through armies or wealth, but through the irresistible pull of unanswered questions, through the sense that something remains hidden, unfinished, intentionally concealed. And while their physical order was dismantled, the spirit of their mission, their discipline, and their enigmatic discoveries persisted through symbols. Through generations, through the unquiet imagination of the world, the Vatican extinguished their bodies. The world resurrected their meaning. That is why their legacy is not merely historical, it is psychological, cultural, and eternal. And as you leave this story behind, one certainty follows you like a shadow. The Knights Templar were defeated in the eyes of the Church, but victorious in the memory of mankind. Their silence outlasted every accusation. Their mystery outshined every decree. And their legend grew beyond every boundary Rome tried to impose. The Templars may no longer walk the earth, but they walk every question that refuses to fade, every secret that resists ao tempo, every truth the world still isn't ready to hear. Their legacy is not a relic, it is a pulse, an echo, a reminder that some truths do not die, they wait. If this journey into the hidden truth of the Knights Templar stirred something inside you, a curiosity, a question, or even a sense that history holds far more than we've been told, then make this moment count. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and share your thoughts in the comments so we can continue uncovering the secrets buried beneath centuries of silence. Your engagement não é apenas apoio. It's the force that keeps these forgotten stories alive, pushing us deeper into the mysteries the world tried to erase.